So our first keynote speaker, and there'll be an afternoon keynote as well, is a true hero for representative democracy. Congressman Keith Ellison has represented the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota in the House of Representatives since taking office in January 2007. In his staff team's own words, the 5th Congressional District is the most vibrant and ethnically diverse district in Minnesota with a rich history and rich traditions. It includes the city of Minneapolis, where they have ranked choice voting of great interest to us, and the surrounding suburbs. Keith Ellison's philosophy is one of generosity and inclusiveness. His roots as a community activist and his message of inclusivity through democratic participation resonate throughout the district that he represents. His priorities in Congress are promoting peace, prosperity for working families, environmental sustainability, and civil and human rights. He is a co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the first Muslim to be elected to Congress and the first African-American elected to the House from Minnesota. In 2013, we were honored at Fair Vote to celebrate Congressman Ellison as a champion of democracy. That year, he joined with Congressman Mark Pocan as lead sponsors of legislation to establish an explicit right to vote in the Constitution. He's also sponsored legislation to take his state's success with Election Day registration nationwide and been an eloquent advocate of ranked choice voting, the electoral system used to elect the Minneapolis mayor, city council, and many other offices. I know I'm looking forward to what he has to say today, and would ask that you join me in giving a round of applause this morning to our keynote speaker, Keith Ellison. Hoping that he's here. And he is. Hey, Keith.
Hey, hey.
Great to see you.
Good to see you too, man.
Hey.
Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Let me tell you, it's great to be here with you to be talking about voting and the franchise in our country. It's really excited that we're galvanizing some real energy, and I want to say thank you to Fair Vote, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and the U.S. Vote Foundation for organizing this awesome summit. The fact is that the people in this room and people across this country are safeguarding what may be the most important and most precious thing in our country, and that is the right to cast a ballot that will result in the selection of someone that the majority of the people want. And this is real work, you know, and I'm excited that you're here assembled to fight for this, because it's clear to me that we're not just operating in an environment where everybody doing the right thing for the right reasons is just working to sort of get a good outcome. In fact, my experience shows me that, in fact, there's some very strong countervailing headwinds that we in this room are dealing with. In fact, one of the leading conservative thinkers in our country, a guy named Paul Weyrich, many of you familiar with, famously said, I do not want everyone to vote. In fact, I believe my electoral chances for what I want to see happen increase as the electorate goes down. And so if that spirit is what's animating the headwinds that I just mentioned a moment ago, we have to recognize that, we have to be clear on that, and we have to understand that as we fight for the right to extend the right to vote and fair vote, that there are some people who would rather just say that the electorate needs to be small and predictable and compliant with what they want. And it's too bad, because, you know, you would think that we could all agree, hey, let's just get everybody to vote, and then you put your ideas out there, I'll put my ideas out there, and we'll see who wins. But that's not the way they want to do it. They say, hey, look, you know, this election doesn't go to the majority of the people, it goes to the majority of the electorate, and I want to control that. So thank you all very much. I think that if people are fighting to keep us from voting, we need to have a fighting plan to keep our vote. And I think that the greater enfranchisement for our fellow Americans and our country means we have to protect voting rights, we need to make voting easy as possible, and we need to fix our broken campaign finance laws. And I want to talk about those three things today. Let me just mention protecting our voting rights. You know, we do not need laws that protect against voter fraud. We need laws that protect the right to vote. Republicans, and I don't want to make this into a party thing, quite frankly, but I'll say conservatives know that the data doesn't support the need for these restrictive laws. And I remember way back as a Minnesota state legislator making the case that there's no voter impersonation going on. Why do we need these photo ID laws? Well, I was missing the point. The point was they wanted to restrict the right to vote. And the reality is that we've got to be clear on that. 30 states have voter ID laws that keep some 23 million voting age people from voting. And who are the people who don't have the photo ID so they can go vote? Well, they're the people that Paul Wade Rich wouldn't want to vote. They're low-income, minority, young, older. They're people with disabilities. They're people who traditionally don't come within, they're not the right people, if you understand what I mean. and the fact is that the people who push these photo ID laws don't expect them to result in a landslide. But today, elections are won at margin. In the state of Minnesota, the election before the last election, both our governor, Mark Dayton, and our Senator Al Franken won in recount elections. One of them was 312 votes. The other one was 8,700 votes, less than 1%. In both of those elections, just shaving off certain people would have changed the result. And so these photo ID laws really are aimed at people who are more vulnerable, less politically connected. And I want to let you know that in two elections ago, not last election, but the one before, we had a photo ID proposal on our ballot to make it a constitutional amendment of our Minnesota Constitution that you must have a government-issued photo ID to vote. And when this proposal was first made, people were saying we can't beat it because the polling was so very high. The public thought, well, what's wrong with having an ID? I mean, you have an ID for, write a check or something. You've heard all these lines before. But one thing that we did prove is that you can defeat photo ID at the polls. And over the course of the spring, summer, and fall, the polling for photo ID just fell. But it didn't fall on its own. It fell because a few hard-headed, unreasonable individuals got out there and defied the polls and helped educate the public and help the public understand that it's expensive, it's unnecessary, and it disenfranchises people, including veterans serving abroad. And that's how we beat it. So I just want to say, don't ever believe the so-called smart people who tell you that that these things can only be won in a courtroom. No, they can be done at the ballot box too, if we have the commitment and the drive to do so. I have a couple of bills that I think will help protect the right to vote. One bill is the Voter Access Protection Act, which ensures that no American citizen is denied the right to vote because they don't have a photo ID on Election Day. I think that there are a lot of ways to identify people, and we don't need photo ID laws. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Keith, we're not going to pass this thing right away. So let's fight for it. Let's fight for it. Does that make sense to anybody? And the other one is the Right to Vote Amendment. Now, Mark Bocan and I have introduced this piece of legislation to try to create a constitutional right to vote and protect American voters from laws that compromise their ability to vote. Now, it is true that we have a robust debate, even on the side of the people who care about voting, whether or not we need a constitutional right to vote. There are folks who see it, say, hey, there's already an implicit right to vote, and there's some folks who say we need an explicit right to vote, as I do. But let me look at it, just look at it this way. If we had an explicit right to vote, it would help the 5 million convicted felons that are barred from voting to vote. Why? Because then people who want to restrict the right to vote would have to use the same legal criteria to deprive that right that you'd have to deprive any fundamental right, which would be strict scrutiny, and the burden would shift, and people who want to take away people's right to vote would have to carry it. And if we had an explicit right to vote, it would help stem the tide of restrictive state laws by encouraging courts to stop using balancing tests and instead apply strict scrutiny, like I just mentioned. And if we had an explicit right to vote, it would help Congress enforce the right to vote by giving it the authority to improve standards and oversee state procedures to ensure that they're fair. And if we had an explicit right to vote, the tax-paying citizens of the District of Columbia, I believe, would have voting representation in the House and Senate. And so I think that would help quite a few folks out who live right where we are right now. Now, I also think we need to make voting easier. It should be easier. In other countries, it's easier. Why should voting be so difficult? Tuesday? Who thought that up? I mean, the fact is that there's wide variation in when people can vote. You can't necessarily register to vote on Election Day. I've often asked myself why you should have to register to vote. Why shouldn't it be automatic? You know? And there are a number of things we could do to improve. In fact, currently we have 8,000 jurisdictions that make decisions about how to administer elections. I mean, you know, some folks might think, oh, there's 50 different election systems. No, there's way more than that. County by county, we're talking. And the result is massive inequality between jurisdictions that is both intentional and even unintentional, and we need to make voting easier. So a few ideas on this are the President's Commission on Election Administration, led by a Democrat and a Republican, keep it bipartisan, came up with an important way to improve our system. And it's now time for lawmakers to make those suggestions law. In Minnesota, we have same-day voter registration, and it increases turnout. I don't know if there's any Minnesotans here today. No, 1, 2, 3. But the fact is that, you know, it does not serve one party or another. We have had Tim Pawlenty, Republican governor. We now have Mark Dayton. And we've even had Jesse Ventura, independent governor. So my point is, same-day voter registration doesn't favor a party. It favors the activists. It favors the eager and the people who plan well. And I think it definitely helps the people in office reflect who the people really, really want. The result has been that Minnesota is consistently, and all same-day voter registration states are consistently at the top of turnout. And it's just a better thing. On Election Day, you literally can go get anybody of voting age who's qualified to go vote. Whereas if you have these 30-day or however many day registration systems, you literally have to walk past your neighbors if they're not registered to vote already. And what is it so magical about this 30-day registration thing? We have not suffered any problems with the integrity of our ballots, and I think that it's something we should fight for. Let me also say that that we should really explore Saturday voting. We know that Saturday voting would increase turnout, so let's do it. We should have. We also in the last election in Minnesota had no excuse absentee voting, which allowed people to go early and vote before the election day. And we also need to improve technology. We know that better technology will improve everything from ballot design issues to long lines. So we need to fund the proper technology for voting and the security of our ballot. And then also we need skilled and, I believe, paid poll workers. You know, the richest country in the world and in the history of the world shouldn't be just relying on mostly elderly seniors to volunteer to run the elections. These folks need some stipends. We need some training. And I think that we're very grateful to the volunteers who make the elections run, but I think we can do better than we're doing. Finally, I think we really need to fix our broken campaign finance laws. I just introduced a bill just the other day that said that if you are a corporation who has criminal convictions, and you know corporations can have criminal convictions as they should. Some people even think they're people who have convictions. Then you shouldn't be able to contribute money in an election campaign. Does that not seem perfectly logical, right? If you're a person and you have a felony conviction, in many places you cannot vote. In all but 2 places, your vote at least is temporarily taken away from you. And yet, if you are a corporate felon, as BP is, right, you know, the people who brought you the Gulf oil spill, then they could just keep on giving money to whoever and candidates they want. Do you all think this is a good bill? Yes. Okay, good. Well, help me get behind it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You seem like you're not too sure about how you feel about it. Heather, is it okay? See, she knows what she's talking about. All right. So anyway, so elections should be won by people with the best ideas and that hustle the most and that reach out to the community the most, not those with the most money or the best at drawing district lines or manipulating that process. In 2014, the election cycle, super PACs raised nearly $700 million. The Koch brothers just promised that in the next election they're going to spend next to $1 billion. Awesome. Right. And the Supreme Court is busy gutting the Voting Rights Act as we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of it. And of course, the opening of the campaign finance floodgates has already occurred, and we're being and we really need to step up to this thing before we lose any chance of keeping our representative democracy. We should be passing laws that protect voters and stop corporate interests from drowning out political speech of everyday Americans. And so closing the fast-growing dark money loopholes is essential. It is a top order of business, and some members of Congress are trying to lead the way. I'm real proud of another bill by a friend of mine, by John Sarbanes. Some of you all know his bill. He has an excellent campaign finance bill, and it's called the Government by the People Act, and that will call for a mix of public and private election funding. And if we have public financing, you don't need the wealthy to run for office. One of the weirdest questions, to me it's weird, that we ask whenever we're recruiting candidates to run for Congress is, can they self-fund? Think about that. We've just said police officers, teachers, artists, small business people need not apply. And we've just said that the people least likely to know how much a gallon of milk costs, because they don't have to go buy it at the store themselves, are going to be running our country. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we are corrupting our patrimony, and we need to stop. Representative Sarbanes' bill would do a lot of good. In fact, he's even run the numbers for every member of Congress on how much they would make, how much they could be able to raise on their particular, based on their particular portfolio of fundraising. And several members, including me, would actually raise more money if we had his system that was a mix of public and private finance. So it's not necessarily going to hurt you. The big thing is, well, we won't be able to raise the money. Well, yes, we will. And we'll get it from more people, and we'll get it, and it'll be more reflective of support rather than just getting funded by a few number of people who can write max out checks. So again, there's legislation being introduced. There's legislation that you can help us organize and rally behind. I can tell you that members of Congress are very bad at organizing, mobilizing, and educating the public. We try, we go on TV, we talk to people in our district, but to have a nationwide mobilization around education, mobilization, and organization is difficult. That is something that you are expert in. And I'm telling you that we, who care about the issues that you care about, will introduce and force votes on legislation that'll advance our cause. But we need you to continue your excellent work at mobilizing, educating, and organizing the community around representative democracy. At the end of the day, I just want to say that when our country was founded, it wasn't good enough to be a white male to vote. You had to be a white male and be 21, own some property, and be Protestant. Catholics need not apply. But then, you know, our country evolved and we saw Jacksonian democracy take hold, and white men could vote, whether they had property or not, whether they were Catholic or Protestant or not. And then we moved a little further. We had the Civil War. We had a big debate. You know, black men won the right to vote. Women still did not have a constitutional right to vote. And then unreasonable, hard-headed people like Susan B. Anthony would not tolerate it, and she fought and she fought and she fought. 1920, she and many others got the right for all adults to vote. And then, even though the right to vote was in the 15th Amendment, black men and women still couldn't really vote in much of this country, and people wouldn't tolerate that. And so they got in the way, they put their bodies in the way, and we lost people, they died. I hope you all see this movie Selma. It's excellent. And still people fought, and we won the constitutional right to be free of these poll taxes, and we won the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which we're still fighting to maintain. But by the early 70s, even 18-year-olds got the right to vote, because shouldn't you be able to vote if you're going to be asked to go fight and die in Vietnam? And so the trajectory of voting and participation in our country has been to expand. It's been to increase and include more people. Now in 2015, 2014, and even before that, there are people who say, well, you know what? Enough with all this expansive democracy business. We need to get this thing back under control so the right people are voting. And I'm just proud to be in a room with people who reject that idea out of hand and are here to say, no, we believe America is stronger, better, and more inclusive when more and more people have the right to participate in this representative democracy. So have a wonderful conference, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me.